Alright, let's solve the average problem. We know that from our out inputs, it will be real numbers, and the last letter of our input will be Q. So let's look at this example. We have four real numbers, and the last letter will be Q. The problem is we don't know the exact number of inputs, so we have to make some kind of loop until we find the letter Q and break it. And for our output, it will be in two decimal places, so we have to keep track of these values in float. And if there are no data, our string or our output will be no data here. So let's look at the problem in a simpler way. Let's say we have inputs, and from these inputs, we have to check whether it is a letter Q or not. If it is not the letter Q, then we can go back to the input. If it is not, we can take the input again. But if it is the letter Q, then we have to find the mean value of the inputs. Alright, so from this loop, there are a few problems. Firstly, we have to some way get the value of the mean. And we can get that from finding the sum over the total amount of inputs n. So we can find these two values from the loop. And the way is we have to somehow keep track of how many inputs are there. We get one input, and if it is not Q, then it is a valid input. Or we can say that if it is not a Q, we can increase the n value by 1. As and likewise, the sum here will be increased by the input value if it is not the letter Q. And now we have one last thing to take care of, and that is if the amount of inputs here is actually 0, so there is only letter Q, then our mean it cannot be calculated, and there are no data, so we have to output no data. Let's check if this is n equals 0. If no, then we can go to mean. But if yes, then we can put in here the no data. And that will be our loop, our program. Now let's start with the coding process. Firstly, we have to keep track of the n and the sum. Let's n be 0 and sum be 0. And then we have to start our loop. We have to take in the input. So we have a loop which take in an input, and we'll check whether this input is the letter Q or not. If the input is letter Q, we can break the loop and go to the next step. So we're going to break the loop. But if input is not letter Q, we are going to increase the n by 1 and the sum by the amount of inputs. So let's increase n by 1 and sum by the amount of inputs. And here we are going to have a little problem because input is in string, and our value here we are adding string to integer, so we have to change this to a number, possibly a float, to align with our output. And that's pretty much for the loop. Now after we break out from the loop, we are going to check whether n is 0 or not to answer our mean value. So if n is 0, we cannot print a mean value. We have to print no data. And if n is something else, let's say 2, 3, whatever, then we have to print the mean value. And the mean value is to to be printed into decimal places. So we have to use format. We will format our string into two decimal places. And we can find the mean from the sum over total amount of inputs n. And that should be it for our program. Hey, compilation error. The problem is, I forgot the colon here. Alright, let's go again. There we go. That's it.